On this video I will build a cheap and easy outdoor chair. I got the idea for the build from another YouTuber. I will link the original video to the description. Another reason for doing this build is that I'm moving to a new workshop in few weeks, and while cleaning up my shop I found out that I have lots of leftover pieces, especially 2x6 and 2x8, which are the main, or actually the only components I will be using for this build, so it was a perfect match. I needed to use the wood somehow because I want to make the move to a new workshop easier, and I actually had the material already existing at my workshop, so it was time to start building. I quickly milled the wood, and what I'm doing here is that I'm cutting the angle of the back support piece, which in my case I set up to 30 degrees. And then I start marking the area which I need to cut off, because I will be using a half flap joint for this. And this is actually my first time ever doing a half flap joint. So it was an interesting exercise for me. Because as I've said on my other videos, I am not a full-time woodworker. I'm not even a professional. I'm still learning the trades. So new techniques, always interesting to learn, especially with this build. It was nice because the material cost was very cheap. In my case I had the material, but I calculated it to be roughly $50 or something. So this is a cheap build, but the chair actually is a very sturdy one, so might be an interesting one for others to build as well. The way I'm doing the half flap is the very traditional, just using table saw without a dado blade. And contrary to many videos I've seen of people, especially in US, saying that dado stack is illegal in Europe, it is not. Even I have a dado stack, but I was just lazy. I didn't want to change it here because I only needed to do a few of these cuts and it didn't take that long. So also I think it makes it a bit more approachable for people who doesn't have a dado stack, so you can build it without, but obviously it would be maybe a bit quicker to do it with a dado stack. But yes, we do have dado stacks in Europe as well. Anyway, back to the build. So what I'm doing here is making the other side of the half flap, because obviously I need to join it with another piece of wood, so that's exactly what you see me doing here. Exactly the same process than I had with the back support pieces. I'm just making these ones now so that I can actually glue them up. If you have never done a half flap, like I hadn't, I recommend doing it. This is actually quite nice when you just hammer the pieces out and use your chisel to even everything out. So one of those moments in woodworking which I really enjoy. I will surely be using the joint in future as well, because it is super strong as well, of course, when you finally glue it up. So for my first half flap ever, I was actually quite happy that the fit is very snug, and I didn't get any noticeable gaps or anything. So pretty much nailed it on the first time. I guess we all get lucky sometimes. I'm sure when I do more of these I will eventually make a mistake. Well, to tell you the truth, it wasn't a perfect fit, which you will see actually once I add the clamps and remove them. So sideways it was pretty much a perfect fit, so as I mentioned there was no gaps. But you see, when I cut the initial half flap for both of these pieces, I didn't measure it exactly correctly. There's like a 1 millimeter or 2 millimeter kind of a difference between these, so this one I need to sand. And especially with this soft wood, this would be very easy to hand sand as well, but as I have my drum sander, why not? This makes my life even easier. So I just pushed it through my drum sander for a few times, and then everything was nice and flush. So not a big issue, but just for the next time I will know I need to be even more exact with my measurement when I do the half flaps. But still, as mentioned, for my first one I'm actually happy how it turned out. So this chair is kind of a prototype version where I want to test that it will be nice to sit. But I'm planning to make more of these, because I will eventually have 2 of these at my house. And then I'm planning to have at least 2 at my summer cabin as well. And when I know that I will be building probably 4 or more of these, I think it's best to create a template that I can actually use for the future once I get all the dimensions and measures correct. because once I have the template, it will be so very easy to use my router to kind of copy and paste as many of these chairs as I want in future. So what you see me doing here is building the template, and I'm just using pocket holes to join the pieces together, and then I'm using my scientific round over measuring thing. I mean, you can use anything. I just found a bucket which I'm using here to make the corners nice and round. And then I basically freehanded all the other sections, just kind of thinking the form where it might be nice to sit. But this was a bit of a trial and error, because I had no idea will it be nice or not. You will see later in the video how it turned out. There were some issues, but I was able to fix them quite easily. The jigsaw leaves a bit of a rough surface, so then I just quickly sanded out the form or the template so that when I move over to my router, everything will be kind of nice and uniform, because this will be the form that I copy basically to the pieces of wood that I joined together earlier with the half flap. One good thing with this build is that it's, well, first of all, it's super simple to do, as you have seen, and if you want to build it yourself, there's really no measurements needed, because, for example, these support pieces, you can do the width in any way you like. It can be one-person chair, it can be two-person chair, so just make whatever fits your purposes. In my case, I decided this to be like one-person chair, so then I added the support pieces to fit that measurement. But as mentioned, you can do whatever you need to do. Then I quickly milled more lumber to create the slats needed for finalizing the chair. Obviously, you don't even need to do the milling process, I mean, because you could actually just use the 2x4s or 2x6s that you get from the store, but the end result will obviously be a bit nicer if you go the extra step on making everything nice and straight by milling it, then cutting it on your table. So, and then there is the extra step that I did, which was to create this nice round over to all of the slats on my router table. And you don't really need a router table for this. You can actually do this with a handheld router as well. Actually, in the original video, which is linked to the description, you can see how this face was done without a router table. So you can do this build with very simple and basic set of tools. So no fancy tools required. I mentioned that I'm not a professional woodworker, but surely I am not a professional one doing videos either. So you can basically see my hand here. But what I'm doing here is using this very simple jig on my drill press to make sure that the point where I will eventually drive the screws in will be in exactly the same position for every slat, because that will look nice in the finalized piece when everything will be exactly on the same spot on the bench, because if they wouldn't be, you would actually spot it right away and it looks too DIY in my opinion. So these small things will actually make the difference on whether the chair looks nice or not, in my opinion. So using the drill press jig actually makes this phase a lot easier as well, because as I mentioned now, the pre-drilled pilot holes are on exactly the same spot on every slat. It makes this phase a lot easier, and as mentioned, the end piece will look nicer as well. The spacer I'm using between the slats is actually a piece of domino. I mean, it can be anything, you can choose however wide you want that gap to be. But in my case, I just decided to use a piece of domino because I think that adds just the right amount of gap that I wanted on my piece. But in your own design, of course, you can do whatever you like. Prior to this moment, I haven't been able to test how this actually works, because I freehanded all the forms and I have been just hoping that everything will be nice once it's completed. And as you can see from my face, there was a bit of an issue, which I will talk about now. So it's complete, or so I thought. There's bit of an issue. It's because this is basically the first time when I can actually test this out and it's too long. Really not nice to be here, so I would need to sit like this, so there's some modifications I need to do. The modifications are actually very simple, so I just take some of the slats out and then use my jigsaw to just make it a bit shorter, because as I mentioned it was too long. And this is the point as well about building these prototypes from a cheap lumber. I mean, if you need to modify them, then you will modify them. This is exactly my goal with this build, so test it out, see if it works, make any modifications to the template before I eventually build the ones for my home and summer cabin, where I will probably use a more quality piece of lumber. I don't know what I will be using, but just as mentioned, it's a good idea sometimes to make these prototypes before you actually waste more expensive lumber on it. So making this modification, I think it took like 10 to 15 minutes overall, so very quickly done. Then I was able to test it out again, and now it was much better to be on, and I was actually quite happy. So then it was time to put it to the place where this prototype version will be actually in use. And obviously the final place will be the bed of my truck. No, not really. But I'm actually giving this chair to my brother, because when I showed him the picture he was interested in trying it out, getting it for free. I will of course get some feedback as well if it's nice, if I still need to modify something. But here you see how it looks like, so I hope you liked the video, and as always I really appreciate if you can subscribe, like, make any comments. Thanks for watching.